What's up, everybody? Coming at you with video number 2 of this series, where we are going to talk about essentially what the not addicted approach is based on, or based off of. Or rather, I guess you could say what the goal of it is, what we're trying to change specifically. Excuse me. I'm sorry. I've been eating nuts. I know it sounds weird, but it's literally Planters, peanuts. All right. But anyway, so yeah, today, and with this video, there's a few things that I'm going to cover, and unfortunately, I don't have anything to write and show. And so, if you're gonna watch this and you want to follow along, you take notes so you can keep track of what we're going through. And so I've basically formulated at least 4 things that the goal of the not addicted approach is meant to address. And those 4 things are: number 1, your sense of hope; number 2, your sense of confidence in dealing with this issue, and also just self-confidence in general. Number 3, normalize. And what I mean by that is not, excuse me, but it's not like normalize your addiction. It's normalize yourself. There's a common narrative in the addiction world that because you've had an experience with substances, this means that you are somehow an abnormal person. The addict is different from the normal individual, and I don't believe that. I believe that every addict has the capability to live, I guess, what you could consider a normal life, whatever that is. And so that's number 3. And then number 4 is to simplify. I kind of talked about this yesterday, where dang it. See, this is why you don't eat nuts. Pretty sure I got a chunk of one that I inhaled instead of swallowing. But number 4 is simplify. And so, again, addressed this yesterday, talking about how complexity equals confusion. And so I like to think that not addicted takes an approach to addiction that is very simple, and that is not confusing at all, but very easy to understand. And so that's going to be the first part, so we'll talk about those individually, and then we're going to talk about kind of the, how should I put it? So CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, is based on the premise that your thoughts influence your feelings, which then influences your behavior. Not addicted is based on the premise that everyone has an overall philosophy. And philosophy just simply being, how do you view things? How do you look at things? So I'm in Florida right now, and so I have the philosophy that Florida is a lot better than Michigan. And that's the philosophy. And so, like thoughts, feelings, behaviors is to CBT, philosophy, number 1, attitude, number 2, activity, number 3, results, number 4, and then lifestyle, number 5. So if you're going to write these out, you're going to essentially 1, 2, 3, 4, and then number 1 is philosophy, then attitude, activity, results, lifestyle. And it's kind of a similar but more in-depth way of describing the idea of your thoughts influence your feelings, which influences your behavior. The idea here is that whatever your philosophy is influences your attitude, which then that attitude and that philosophy influence your activity, and then all of that put together gives you results, and then everything put together accumulates into your overall lifestyle. And so that's like I don't know if you want to call it the science, if you will, of the not addicted approach. But that's what we're trying to look at here. Those are the things we're trying to change. Philosophy being number one. Mainly, what not addicted is it is a rework of your philosophy of addiction that hopefully leads to a different attitude about it, that gives you different activity surrounding it, and then gives you different results, which ultimately accumulates into an overall lifestyle for yourself. And so that's what we're going to be talking about. So going back to the first four, again, the first four, which was the hope, the confidence, normalize, and simplify. Those are like, what, like the things that the senses that you should have by the time you're done with, let's say, the material. And so hope, number one, I believe, is the most important one. At the end of the day, somebody who has no hope about something is probably not going to do anything about it. In other words, I believe the addict needs to believe, or needs to have the hope, rather, that them making a change to their using or quitting would give them better results for their life. Or just in general, the hope that even if you did try to do something about it, it could stick and it could work for a lifetime. Again, this is a lot different than the standard disease approach, which basically says, once an addict, always an addict. And then, you've heard statements like only 1 out of 10 people make it. You've heard statements like relapse is a part of the process. These are not hopeful statements at the end of the day, and I think that that's why some people are stuck. What I like to say in this, with this type of thing, with addiction, is that some of you are only still struggling with it because of a belief, right? And it may be the belief that there is no hope. I know that there are some people who are using out there who literally just do it because it's a means to an end for them. It's not about getting high, it's not about getting drunk, but it's a means to an end. Like for me, when I was going through my heroin stuff, I would say that, well, I'll be dead by 30. What does it matter? And so heroin, to an extent, was a means to an end at a time, until I got hopeful about things again. So that's why I believe hope needs to be addressed. And then the confidence factor. Oh my goodness. I like to believe I'm not somebody who lacks on confidence. And again, from the standard addiction world, you get, if you were to be so confident as to stand up in like one of their groups, one of their circles, and say, hey, I'm completely done with heroin, never touching it again for the rest of my life, guaranteed. Or you could go as far as saying that you're cured of the issue, which is what I say. I will happily say that I'm cured of my heroin problem. And what people often misconstrue that with, or at least the pushback that I get on it, is, the idea of, okay, so what are you saying, Jake? Are you saying that, you can go out there, use heroin again, and you'll be fine? And it's like, you're missing the entire point of the statement. I'm cured in the sense that I'm so firm in my conviction that I will never do it again. I will say I'm cured. And it's amazing the amount of pushback that gets. What I like to compare it to is like, if you quit a job, and that's why I tell people to do sometimes too. Take the narratives that we have on addiction and try to apply them to anything else in your life. Again, like a job. So I used to work at a Tim Hortons, and I've quit that job. It's been, I don't know, 10 years maybe, since I've quit that job. And I will stand here every single day and say I am never working in fast food again. And nobody questions that. Nobody doubts that conviction. Nobody doubts your confidence level with that. But it's interesting if you say that about addiction. If I were to treat leaving a job as the way in which treatment, treats an addiction, it would go something like this. It would be, well, I'm a recovering Tim Hortons employee. And once a Tim Hortons employee, always a Tim Hortons employee. I got to make sure that I don't go there anymore. I can't drink coffee because that'll remind me of working there. I can't, if I see one of the regulars that I used to deal with all the time, they're out on the street. Well, we know that's a trigger for Tim Hortons employment. I might be triggered into putting in an application if I see that person on the street. If I talk to any of my former coworkers, that might trigger me and make me want to put in an application to work there again. And then I got to make sure, I can never eat a donut. Again, no more coffee at all. Don't go through the drive-through. Don't even pass by one of the Tim Hortons stores. Because all of these things could lead me into putting in an application to work there again. So that's what it would look like if I were treating my former Tim Hortons employment like we would treat addiction. And I think that all of us would look at that and say, well, we would look at that and we would say, that's stupid. You quit a job, you leave a job. So what? You're not a recovering whatever employee, and you're certainly not, unless you want to work there again, you're certainly not going to put in an application to work there again. And so you can take that, you can apply that type of idea to relationships, to, places you used to live, cars you used to own, things you used to have, whatever it may be. And, just kind of look at the absurdity of what you're saying. If you try to treat those things you used to do just like you treat an addiction, again, we would look at that and we'd say it just doesn't make sense. And so I've looked at it and I've said it just doesn't make sense. And so I'm going to treat my addiction just like I treat a bad job. If I don't like it, I'm going to leave it. And I'm not going to believe that somehow by accident I can be forced into employment again. Again, we would look at that and we'd say that's just ridiculous. And so confidence is key here. That same kind of confidence that you have towards that notion of there are certain things in your life you're not going back to at all. You can have towards addiction, that same level of confidence. And for those who might say, well, Jake, somebody could get overconfident, somebody could get complacent. I'd rather go with overconfidence. That's the more common thing. And this is what I'll say. I would rather have somebody be overconfident and that confidence fail them sometimes than somebody be deathly fearful, and according to the psychology of fear, the fear and what you're most afraid of typically becomes the reality, mainly because you think about it all the time. And so I would rather have somebody approach an addiction issue with confidence than, let's say, again, that fear. Because the fear, the fear of relapse, the fear of triggers, the fear of emotions, the fear of people, the fear of places, the fear of things, those fears can just become a reality. And so we want to avoid that, simply because I think you get better results by approaching with confidence, ultimately. And so that means we're going to have to build up that confidence, and that's part of what this approach does, or at least what I like to think it does. And then that goes to normalize, right? Again, this is just normalize yourself. As I like to say, you're not that special. Just because you've done drugs, you're not that special. In my case, I'm not special just because I've had a heroin problem. I'm not different. And so, we need to be able to shed that, and get back into a sense of normalcy with ourselves, right? And so that's not just with addiction, but this goes with mental health, mental disorders, and stuff like that, which, again, I do talk about. And so then that leads to simplify. At the end of the day, I want you to see addiction as a simple thing. Again, going back to the example of, leaving a job. Leaving a job is a simple thing. If you don't want to work there anymore, what do? You quit. So, say the same with addiction. If you don't want to do it anymore, you quit. And in today's world, quitting a substance is very, very doable. There are literally hundreds of ways in which you can get sober. Most of them are just a phone call away. And this is why I'd say I wouldn't be scared if I ever became, let's say, a heroin addict again. Why? Because I know that with just a phone call, I can get myself into a detox, and I can detox off of it. Hopefully relatively comfortably, depending on the detox. And so that's not the concern. The issue with addiction is not getting you to stop. It's getting you to stay that way. That's the issue, and the problem is that's a lifestyle choice, which, again, not everybody makes. Okay, so those are, I want to keep this brief, or at least down to a half hour, but so those are the 4 goals, if you will, of Not Addicted. Sense of hope, sense of confidence, you're normal again, and things are simple, at least in your mind. Things are simple. An important thing to note, that just because something is simple doesn't mean it's easy, and just because something isn't easy doesn't mean it's impossible. I feel like people often conflate those things, right? But so many things, so much of the stuff has simple solutions. It's just the difficult part is getting to that solution, right? Okay, so that's that. Now we're going to move on. Again, like I said, if you're trying to follow along, you may want to be writing these things down if you want to keep track of what we're talking about. And so this goes then to kind of the, again, I don't know what to call it yet, the science of Not Addicted, like thoughts, feelings, behaviors, but instead, again, remember, philosophy, attitude, activity, results, lifestyle. And so we're kind of going to break these down just a little bit, talk about them briefly, each one. Again, starting with number 1, philosophy. Like I said, everybody has a philosophy towards life. And how philosophy also then trickles down to the other things. Your philosophy influences your attitude. So, like I said, as the example of what this means, I'm here in Florida, and I say Florida is much better than Michigan. And so my attitude then, and how that influences the attitude, I'm in a good mood. The activity, okay, up in Michigan where weather is, especially now at this time of the year, the weather is just crap. It's cold, it's dark, it's gloomy, it's disgusting. And it pisses me off. But either way, though, here it's bright, it's sunny, it's mid-70s. And so that influences, that gives me that good attitude, which then influences my activity. I don't want to stay inside. Yeah, up in Michigan, I'm sitting at home. I'm in buildings. I'm playing, I have no motivation to go out because outside sucks at this time of year. Summer in Michigan isn't bad. I'm not harping on Michigan for that, but this time of year in Michigan, it sucks. I hate it. But, again, down here though, the weather, the attitude that it puts me in and everything else, that motivates my activity. I want to get out. I don't want to be inside. I don't want to sit and watch TV. I don't want to play games or whatever or anything like that. I want to be outside enjoying the weather. Then that gives me results, based off of that activity. Obviously, I've been walking a lot more, and so it's good health. The attitude as well motivates you to eat better too. And so, been eating better, and that gives you better, just a better feeling in general. And then, imagine if I were to be able to take the attitude, the activity, the philosophy from here and apply it up there to where I live. That would give me better results, most likely, and then as well as accumulate into an overall type of lifestyle, different than the current one that I may have now. And so this breaks down to many different things. And so let's talk about it in that sense of addiction and how it applies to that. So people have the philosophy that, and if we're going to go with my philosophy, I'll start with mine. And then we can compare it to the standard, right? The disease philosophy. And so for me, I believe addiction is two things. It is an issue of choice and choices that you make. And then I also believe it is it's an issue of purpose. All right. I used to say spiritual. I do still say that, but for the sake of, I guess, getting kind of everyone to understand and making it kind of tuned for everybody, I'll call it purpose. All right, because spirituality, by definition in the dictionary, is just having a sense of meaning and purpose. It's different from religion, put it like that. And so I believe addiction is an issue of choice and purpose. And so for me, with that being my philosophy towards it, since I believe, number one, it's a choice, that does affect my attitude. My attitude in general is that, well, if I don't want to do it, I'm not going to. Simple as that. I stated yesterday in the video that I made yesterday that from the not addicted perspective, the only thing that makes you use is your decision to do it. And so the good news is, whether you want to or you don't, it's all within your ability to decide, right? You do what you want. Contrary to what some addiction circles say, your best thinking did not get you here. Your best thinking from this perspective got you exactly what you wanted when you wanted it. And I point that out quite a bit throughout the material, that your thinking got you exactly what you wanted when you wanted it. If you wanted drugs, you got them. If you wanted money for those drugs, you got it. If you wanted to hide your behavior, most of the time you did. Sometimes it might have failed. For some, it's like if you wanted to keep your job while, doing this, I mean, you did. Your employer didn't know, stuff like that. So your best thinking got you exactly what you wanted when you wanted it. We have to understand that it was the consequences or the rewards of what we wanted that got us here. All right? The consequences or the rewards of what we wanted got us to this point. It wasn't our thinking that got us to this point. It was the consequences of what we wanted. And the good news is that you can always change what you want. And so that's what we're going to work on. But yeah, so philosophy, again, my philosophy towards addiction is that it's a choice. This motivates my attitude where, again, I don't walk around in fear of relapse at all. I don't walk around in fear of triggers. I don't walk around in fear of, am I going to run into this person or not? That then motivates my activity. To an extent, it doesn't matter where I go. It doesn't matter one bit. For me, I'll go anywhere. I don't care. Again, the philosophy for me is that if I don't want to use, I'm not going to do it. Because the only thing that would make me do it again is my decision to do that. I don't plan on deciding to do that anytime in my future, ever again. It was stupid. It would be according to the not addicted approach, since addiction is not a disease from the standpoint, relapse isn't, there's nothing to relapse into. What you have are either good choices or bad choices, stupid choices. And for me to use again at any point in my life would be, by definition, a very stupid decision. And I'm not going to try to make myself feel better about it by saying, oh, I couldn't help myself. Because I just know that's not true. And I think you know that too. But anyway, so that, again, that choice philosophy motivates the activity. Doesn't matter where I go or what I do. The results is, in general, I live a life that I want to. I go to the places that I want to without fear. I don't, I don't tailor my life around addiction anymore, other than with the work that I do. But certainly not my addiction, if you will. My life is not dictated anymore by the fact that I used to be a heroin addict. It just doesn't show up. It's not in the picture. And so then again, that leads then to my lifestyle, right? And again, my lifestyle is whatever I choose to do, I do. There you go. My lifestyle, again, it's not a life that is built around addiction. And that's my problem with kind of the standard treatment approach, is that, or let's put recovery. This is my problem with recovery, as they call it. Recovery is not freedom from addiction. It is literally your life built and structured around the fact that you used to have a problem with a drug or substance of some kind. Where all or nothing using used to be the story, now in recovery it's replaced with all or nothing avoidance. And then on top of that, though, they add in that fear, or that fear element to it. The fear that, like, hey, if you stop going to your meetings, that's a sign of a relapse. Or if you don't follow up with your aftercare planning and you stop going to treatment, you're on your way to a relapse. I mean, this is a perfect setup. Perfect setup to make sure that you never stop going to treatment. And perfect setup to make sure that your whole life going forward is, again, structured around addiction. And this is where I say, again, some of you are only here because of that idea, because you've never given yourself the mental space to move on, just like you did with the bad job that you used to have in the past, or the bad relationship. Allow yourself to move on. And so you take that, though, that philosophy, attitude, activity, results, and lifestyle, and now you apply the philosophy of addiction as a disease. Well, that gives you some kind of attitude, right? Most commonly what I hear is it's a very ambivalent type of attitude most of the time. Ambivalence simply meaning, like, we don't make up our mind about it. Because, we're told, number one, you can't be so confident to say that you're 100% done, and then you can't say that you're going to go back. And so that leaves you right in the middle, right? Not knowing whether or not you will stay clean. But having those types of ideas where, well, if I don't do this, 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 and this, then I am going to relapse. It's stuff like that. By the way, so you have the disease philosophy, the attitude, relatively ambivalent. I see, I mean, I see quite a bit of fear with it. Um, and I would almost say it's a very codependent type of attitude as well. Um, People become reliant on the professional systems or their sponsors or their meetings for the sake of maintaining their cleanliness or for the sake of maintaining their sobriety. And from the not addictive perspective, the number one thing, and now I have to preface this a little bit because I'll give my biased answer, all right, based off of my own personal beliefs, and then I will give an answer for everyone. The biased answer would be, at least for me, that my reliance is on God and not myself. But God gives me the ability to be able to survive this process, to be able to survive in this world. Now, the answer for everybody then, outside of that, again, that's the biased viewpoint of me and what I do. But outside of that, for everybody else, if you're not on board with that, well, then you have to rely on you. Period. You can't rely on meetings to keep you clean, because we figured out with COVID, those meetings can go away. And then, so many people, I remember, in the place that I work, so many people coming in and saying the thing that did it for them was COVID happened, and they couldn't get to a meeting, or their therapist won't see them. It's a good way to set yourself up for potential failures. If the reliance is not here, as I always say, your last line of defense is your ability to say no. It's not your ability to make it to a meeting. It's not your ability to call your sponsor. Your last line of defense is always going to be your ability to refuse or say no. And so that's disease. That was the philosophy. Then you have the attitude. Then activity. Again, with the disease philosophy, your activity must somehow always, it seems to be centered around either a treatment thing or or something to do with addiction or your former addiction. It's just, I really don't know how else to put it other than most people who believe they suffer with the disease, addiction is a daily factor in their life, even if they're not using, because they go around, hey, I'm an addict. I'm a recovering addict. This is not being free from it. It just isn't. And so, well, then, moving on then to the results aspect, I mean, look, some people maintain a lifetime of sobriety with the disease philosophy. That's perfectly fine. But I guarantee that they probably struggle a whole hell of a lot more than, I guess, than I ever would with it. Again, I've treated this like a bad job. Moved on and don't consider using. Just like I don't consider working at Tim Hortons again. And then that translates into a lifestyle. All right. And so I think you kind of get the point with all of those things working together there. And I'm pretty sure in more videos that I do, we'll talk more about that aspect, the philosophy especially. But I just wanted you to know that. So what Not Addicted tries to do, again, is change the philosophy at number one, where everything trickles down from. Change the philosophy that hopefully leads to a new attitude that gives you a drive for new activities that can produce different results and a new lifestyle. All right, rather than the lifestyle that you've been leading. Here is the clear thing to change first: your philosophy towards this process. So that is the basis of all of this stuff. Those first, the hope. Um, see, this is why I should have written it down too. It's tough for me to follow along with it as well. But hope, confidence, normalize, simplify, and then philosophy, attitude, activity, results, and lifestyle. Those are the important things to remember because we're going to talk about them. Again, the whole thing is based off of that. Though all of those things. So, um, yeah, I think that'll do it for this one. But yeah, I think that's all I've got. I don't know. Yeah, that's all I got. Um, and by chance, I've been curious too. I know that at the end of the day, not yet, these videos don't get too many views, but if you do happen to view them, um, leave a comment of some kind. I have ideas about where I'd like to go with all of this stuff. I would love to start doing perhaps like Facebook Live Q&A type of things. And I would say if you view this and you have a question that you would like to be answered, go ahead and leave a comment with that question. And then in the next video, I will address the question that was asked. And so that's just one idea I've had about, some of this stuff. So I'm going to wrap it up, but I appreciate y'all, and I appreciate you watching if you do. And I just hope that at the end of the day, in some kind of way, this different kind of approach to addiction, makes some kind of a difference for you. Hopefully not only in your addiction, but also just in general in your life. Can make you more hopeful, more confident about yourself. And so, thank you. And until next time, good luck, I guess. All right.